Okay, we've had a problem here.
Can say again, please.
Houston, we've had a problem.
Those words echoed around the world in April 1970, Apollo 13, the mission that almost ended in disaster, the mission that became known as NASA's successful failure. 3 astronauts stranded in space, 200,000 miles from Earth, fighting for survival. They made it back against all odds. They became heroes. Jim Lovell, Jack Swigert, Fred Hayes, their faces on every newspaper, their story told in movies, documentaries, history books. But what if I told you that's not the whole story? What if the real horror of Apollo 13 didn't happen during the mission, but after they came home? Tonight, I'm going to tell you about the interview that was buried, the testimony that was silenced, and the astronaut who came back from space, but wasn't the same person who left. This is the dark secret of Apollo 13. April 17, 1970. The world watched as the Apollo 13 command module splashed down in the Pacific Ocean. Jim Lovell, Jack Swigert, and Fred Hayes emerged from the capsule, exhausted, dehydrated, but alive. The media called it a miracle. NASA called it their finest hour. President Nixon called them heroes. But behind closed doors, something was wrong. The astronauts underwent standard medical examinations, physical tests, psychological evaluations, all routine procedure. But according to leaked medical reports that surfaced years later on obscure internet forums, there were irregularities. Fred Hayes developed a severe urinary tract infection. That part is public knowledge. But what's not widely known is that all 3 astronauts showed signs of what doctors called cognitive dissonance. Memory lapses, difficulty with spatial awareness, and something the reports called temporal confusion, an inability to properly sequence events or recall the order in which things happened. NASA attributed this to stress, exhaustion, and trauma, a reasonable explanation, but then the wives started noticing things. Jim Lovell returned to his home in Houston, Texas, to his wife, Marilyn, and their 4 children. At first, everything seemed normal. The heroes' welcome, the celebrations, the interviews. But Marilyn Lovell noticed something she couldn't quite put her finger on at first. Her husband was distant, cold, as if he was looking at his own family through a window, not living with them. She attributed it to post-traumatic stress. The man had almost died in space after all. He needed time to readjust. But weeks turned into months, and things didn't get better, they got worse. Jim started forgetting things, simple things, not just appointments or birthdays, though he forgot those too, but basic, fundamental things. One morning, Marilyn asked him to drive their daughter to school. Jim stood in the driveway, staring at the car for several minutes. Finally, he turned to Marilyn and said, I don't remember how to do this." Marilyn laughed it off. "Very funny, Jim." But he wasn't joking. His face was blank, genuinely confused. She got in the driver's seat. As she drove, Jim sat silently, staring out the window like he'd never seen a road before. Then there were the words. Marilyn would say something completely ordinary. "Can you put this in the refrigerator?" and Jim would look at her with that blank expression again. Refrigerator? What is refrigerator? At first, Marilyn thought he was playing some kind of cruel joke, testing her patience, but the look in his eyes told her otherwise. He genuinely didn't know what a refrigerator was, or a mirror, or sometimes even his own children's names. But here's what made it truly terrifying. These episodes were inconsistent. One day he would seem perfectly normal, discussing the mission with reporters, remembering technical details about the spacecraft. The next day he couldn't remember how to tie his shoes. Marilyn started to fear him, not because he was violent. Jim never raised his hand to anyone, but because she didn't know who was living in her house. Marilyn tried to get Jim help, but whenever she brought it up, he would become defensive, angry, say she was overreacting. NASA sent a psychiatrist to evaluate him. Jim passed with flying colors, charming, articulate, remembered every detail of the mission. But Marilyn knew, she knew something was fundamentally wrong. Then one night, about 6 months after his return, Marilyn woke up to find Jim's side of the bed empty. She found him in the living room, sitting in complete darkness, staring at nothing. Jim, she whispered, are you okay? He didn't turn around. He just sat there. And then he spoke. We saw it, you know. Saw what? Marilyn asked, approaching slowly. On the dark side, when we lost contact, we saw it. Marilyn felt a chill run down her spine. The dark side of the moon, the 9 minutes when Apollo 13 was out of radio contact with Earth. What did you see, Jim? Jim finally turned to look at her, and in that moment, Marilyn would later say, she didn't recognize the man sitting there. They told us not to talk about it, said it would compromise the mission legacy, compromise national security. Who told you? NASA? Jim shook his head slowly. No, them, the ones we saw. They told us, in our heads, while we were there. Marilyn's hands started shaking. Jim, you're not making sense. You almost died up there. You were oxygen deprived, hallucinating. We could have landed, Jim suddenly shouted, making Marilyn jump back. We could have landed on the other side. The calculations were right. The trajectory was perfect, but they didn't let us. Who didn't let you? Jim's face went blank again, as if someone had flipped a switch. And now we're here, he said quietly, almost sadly. That night, Marilyn packed a bag. She told Jim she was going to visit her sister. But really, she moved into the shed in their backyard. She never slept in the same room as Jim again. Fast forward to 2019, nearly 50 years after Apollo 13. A journalist named Carolyn Tonkinson from the Ohio Star Weekly managed to track down Marilyn Lovell. By this point, Jim Lovell was 91 years old, still alive, still giving occasional interviews about the mission, still hailed as a hero. But Marilyn agreed to talk. Off the record, she said, just to get it off her chest. She told Carolyn everything, the memory loss, the personality changes, the strange things Jim said that night about them and the other side of the moon. And she revealed something else, something she'd never told anyone before. She wasn't alone. Fred Hayes' wife had experienced similar things. Jack Swigert never married, but his family noticed the same changes in him. The three families had quietly stayed in touch over the years, sharing their experiences, trying to make sense of what happened to their loved ones. All three astronauts displayed the same symptoms: the memory gaps, the personality shifts, the obsession with the dark side and what they saw. NASA knew. According to Marilyn, NASA had been monitoring all three men for years. Regular checkups that seemed more like interrogations. But publicly, nothing. The official line remained: post-traumatic stress, nothing unusual. Carolyn Tonkinson wrote up the interview. She was excited. This was huge. The untold story of America's space heroes. She submitted it to her editor at the Ohio Star Weekly. 2 days later, her editor called her into his office. "We can't run this," he said. He looked uncomfortable, nervous even. "Why not? It's all verified. I have recordings, notes." "I got a call," her editor said quietly, "from someone who said this story would be detrimental to national interests." Carolyn was stunned. "Who called you?" Her editor never answered that question. So Carolyn did what any frustrated journalist would do. She posted the article on her personal Tumblr account. It stayed there for years, largely unnoticed, a few hundred views, some comments from conspiracy theorists, but mostly forgotten until July 2024, Jim Lovell passed away at the age of 96. The world mourned a hero. Tributes poured in. NASA released statements. The story of Apollo 13 was retold once again. And that's when people remembered Carolyn's article. For about 2 weeks, Carolyn's blog was getting massive traffic. People were fascinated. Some believed it. Others called it disrespectful to Jim's memory. And then the blog disappeared. Account deleted, all posts gone, including the article about Marilyn Lovell. Some cached versions of the article exist, screenshots, partial copies, but the original with all of Carolyn's notes and Marilyn's full testimony. So what really happened to the Apollo 13 astronauts during those 9 minutes on the dark side of the moon? What did they see that changed them? What was the vision Jim Lovell referred to? Jim Lovell took those answers with him to the grave. Marilyn Lovell has never given another interview, and Carolyn Tonkinson, nobody knows where she is. Please don't forget to subscribe to channel.